thank you, Puranjot. Good morning. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining in this class today. I'm very excited. I think it's going to be a great class. You know, it's a theme, it's a topic that I think is on the minds of a lot of people right now, is how we have to shift the way that we listen. And so we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to definitely spend some time with the 8th body of Japji. If you're a little familiar with that, that'll be great. Otherwise, we'll go through line by line and make sure you understand it and can pronounce it. And we'll recite that for some time and get that experience. We're also going to do a meditation to bring clarity into our mind. So we'll do that, and then we'll take some questions toward the end of this session. So if something comes up, you could just jot it down or put it in the comment area, and Puranjot will keep track of it. Right now, I'd like to tune in, all of us together, with the Mangala Chalan mantra, and I'm going to play it on the harmonium and we'll sing it. So please join in with me. And if you don't know it, the words are Ad Gure Name, Jugad Gure Name, Sat Gure Name, Sri Gurudeve Name. I bow to the primal wisdom, Ad, the primal. Jugad, I bow to the wisdom through all the ages. Sat, the wisdom that is the true wisdom, the truth pervading through the whole universe. And Sri Guru Deve Name, I bow to that highest wisdom that is the teacher, that is the guide for us to find our own connection to the divine. All right?
Gure Name, Sri Gurudeve Name, Gure Name, Gure Name, Sat Gure Name, Sri Gurudeve Name, Gure Name, Gure Name, Sat Gure Name, Sri Gurudeve Name, Gure Name, Gure Name, Sat Gure Name, Sri Gurudeve Sat Gure Name, Sri Gurudeve Name, Gure Name, Gure Name, Sat Gure Name, Sri Gurudeve Name, Sri Gurudeve. As we start this class, I just have a little information to share with you. That this class is presented by Sikh Dharma International, which is a separate organization from 3HO. It's a
sister nonprofit, legacy nonprofit, and our purpose is to provide opportunities to understand about Sikh Dharma, both online and in person. And normally when there's a live in-person summer solstice and winter solstice, Sikh Dharma International is there in our dedicated space, providing classes throughout the days, and then every evening, kirtan. So we can't do all that during this eSummit, but we are here trying to connect with you and allow you to ask questions and find out a little more about Sikh Dharma. We are, during this time of the pandemic, doing a lot of things online, so you may want to check out our website, sikhdharma.org, or in our Facebook Sikh Dharma International page, where you will find that we have weekly programs, several weekly live programs that you can tune into either live or later as recordings. So we hope you'll check those things out. Also, Sikh Dharma International has organized the reciting of Kirtan Soela every evening during this event. So tonight's the last night, but there will be Kirtan Soela available for you. So it's right there in your program. So today I wanted to focus on this topic of listening. And never before, I think, have so many things come together, so many situations come together that are calling on all of us to reevaluate how we listen. Our brothers and sisters are crying out in the streets. Our leaders are sounding the alarm. The earth itself thunders for us to wake up. The sky is crying with tears. Our hearts beat to the rhythm to find a new way. And Guru Nanak, his voice gives us a chance to step through a door, to understand, to expand our awareness into Sunniai, which means deeply listening, so that together, through that stage of deeply listening, then we can emerge in full spirit, reborn. So, as a first step to tuning into our ability to listen, I want to do a very short practice where we're going to chant the mantra, the one-word mantra, Om. It's a nasal sound. It's usually written O-N-G. Okay, so this is from the mantra Ek Onkar Satnam Sri Waheguru, or also in the Mool Mantra. It's the very beginning of the Mool Mantra, which is the beginning of Japji, which is the beginning of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. And so this understanding of Om is very important to understanding all of that wisdom. And the Om is that infinite creative force, that Big Bang, if you will, you know, the thunderous resonance of the universe coming into creation each moment, continuously. So I want you to just place your left hand on your chest and your right hand gently over with just a firm pressure into the chest. This will help you connect to the sound that you're making as you chant this sound, Om. And we're going to try to do it continuously. So I'm going to start, I'll make the sound first. But I want you to not start with me, but actually wait a few moments and then start chanting. And that way your voice will continue after I run out of breath, but I will continue before you run out of breath. So in that way, you and I will create a continuous sound of Om. So just close your eyes, and as you chant this sound, tune into what it feels like, what the vibration feels like in your chest, and then allow that awareness to move outward through the rest of your body, and then out into your aura, and then out into the world around, and the infinite. Become vast in this moment of listening. Now inhale deeply. And relax. Powerful experience, something that I find very nurturing, grounding, and yet also very easy to connect to that divine, infinite source. So, the topic today is about listening. You know, we start out in this human experience being very good listeners. And by that I mean in utero, as infants. You know, that's the primary sense, the first sense that we start to become aware of the world around us. We tune into trying to understand what this world is at that stage in our lives. And we try to match to that sound. We start to have language, and we match our sound to the sounds that we hear. In fact, it's common that people within the same family often sound almost exactly the same. I remember a startling awareness to that when I was about 13, and I picked up the phone. It was ringing, the house phone. And those are the days when we had house phones. And I answered the phone, and the caller assumed by my tone of voice that I was my father. And, you know, you get a wake-up call at that point. Do I want to be my father? You know, so nonetheless, sound and listening is so important to us. But then as we step into our own adulthood, we start to change the way we listen. We start to filter. We start to narrow the bandwidth of what we're listening to. And that choice is about listening to what seems to resonate with what we think, listening to what reaffirms our expectations of the world. Now, that you could see would be natural. But there's another step that many of us end up taking in that sort of refocusing of our listening. And that is when we become fearful and insecure, and we start to only listen to things that agree, and not opening to the possibility that there could be other viewpoints, other ways of understanding. And it's funny, you know, that on this path of consciousness, that even still this pitfall, this problem, this mistake of putting our blinders on and focusing in a very narrow way still happens, even though we intend to be on a path of consciousness. It still happens. It still happens that our little self, our ego, can be so fragile that it cannot handle the questioning of what we thought was what was to be, our expectations. And it goes to the point where we get locked into that expectation, locked into that fantasy, really, of what we think life should be. And therefore, we're not able to be listening broadly. We're not able to be spontaneous. We're only able to function within the narrow band of life, when really there's an infinite choice. So part of this is to do with how our mind works. And it's easy, many of us who have been studying consciousness for a while, it's easier for us to gain some understanding of our own mind. But for many people, especially people who have not studied or taken time to explore ways of understanding the mind is a mystery to most people. It just is. And they get locked into the identity, the self-identity of that voice they hear in the mind. But your mind is not your true self. Your mind is a tool that was given to us in this human life to serve the destiny of our soul, to serve that flourishing of our soul within this human experience. And so how do we get through that? How do we get past that little glitch in our operating system where we fall in love with that voice in our mind? We follow it everywhere. We think it's the bee's knees. It's, it's going to tell us everything we need to know. And yet, it's a self-referencing system. It just takes us further and further down in that loop of getting narrower and narrower. There's a practice I like to teach about in relation to the mind, and that's about visualizing your mind like a stage, and that there's a spotlight, and normally the spotlight is just fixed on that voice, that monkey mind monologue that just keeps going. And that's the nature of the mind. It's going to keep providing more and more thoughts. And so that voice just keeps going, and the spotlight seems to be locked there. However, with some training, with some practice, you can start to move the spotlight to another place on the stage. And that stage actually is pretty empty once you move away from that voice. And so I like to guide people into finding the quiet place on that stage, the stillness in your mind. There's a line from Guru Nanak. Guru Nanak was the first guru of the Sikhs. And he says, "Manjite jagjit." And it literally means when you have victory over your mind, then and only then can you have a sense of victory in life. And victory in life can mean anything, it can mean if you see life as a battle, then okay, it's victory over that battle. But if you see life as an exploration, then it's victory over that journey, right? So, Manjita Jagjit reminds us that, it just comes back to the beginning of understanding life must begin with us understanding our mind. So that voice has led us to a place where we feel like we always have to be in control. We have to explain everything to ourselves, to others. You know this phenomenon, mansplaining, where the patriarchal hierarchy in our society is such that men feel like they have to be telling people how it is, and that behavior comes out of this insecurity that if I can define it, if I can say it aloud, then maybe it will be so, So that explaining the world in a way that fits to our fantasy tries to reassure us. But ultimately, that will fail because life doesn't just revolve around my plan, God has the plan. So we can't try to make the facts, because there are actual facts, we can't make the facts conform to our fantasy. We can't make alternative facts. And so in that state of trying to invent a reality that isn't there, it's a kind of need to dominate. It is a dominating behavior. And I feel like now is the time. In this coronavirus, we are forced to be more inward. In this time of demonstrations in the streets about inequality, we are forced to look inside and address our own understanding of where we fit in that, right? And we can no longer accept the behaviors, the patterns, the habits that we have had. In this discussion around racism, I have to say I am a recovering racist. I can see that I have behaved in a racist way. I have thought in a racist way. And I don't want to, but nonetheless it happened. And so now it's about owning that and going inward and finding a way to understand it and to let it go and to manage it, right? So how can we start this process of really getting in touch? Well, it's through that real deep listening that I mentioned at the beginning, Sunniai. And there's 4 bodies. Sorry about that. There's 4 bodies in Japji that really focus on this concept of deep listening. The 8th body through the 11th body. And today we're just going to look at the first one. But it's really, the experience of understanding this becomes like a gateway to opening our experience to listen deeply, to understand more about who we are and how we want to be in the world and how we want the world to be. And it isn't going to just to conform to my will, but I can start to talk with others about it. I can share my ideas and listen to theirs, because in listening to theirs, it's often more the case that I find that there's even something better than I thought of, you know? It's time to embrace the idea that I don't have all the answers. Now that in itself can be a trigger for fearful feelings, you know, insecurity and self-doubt. Oh, well, if I don't have all the answers, I'm not perfect then. That's right. None of us are perfect. Some of us will have some of the answers, and when we can listen to each other, perhaps we'll get all the answers. But in the meantime, that's the process. We have to let go of our need to project ourselves as knowing everything and be willing to listen, be willing to not speak, but listen. Because that fear of being, not knowing everything, that fear is what is keeping us from knowing the truth. And that fear of not being able to open is what's keeping us from hearing the truth. So I'm going to go through the lines of the body one by one, and in a moment I'm going to ask Buddha to put the words up. But first I'm going to talk about this just a little bit. So Guru Nanak takes us on a kind of voyage through these few lines. He lists like how we can listen and how the universe has different ways of listening, that we aren't the only listeners. And as he identifies these other places that listening is happening, we can start to identify how we can listen in that way. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. So I think we'll put the words up now, Buddha and Jyot, so that they can see this.
Just give me 1 second, Pritpal.
That's fine. I'll start talking about it and then it'll come up. So in a moment you'll see the words, and just stick with me, don't get ahead of yourself too far. So the first line talks about siddhas, which are like yogic masters and spiritual teachers and heroic warriors. And Guru Nanak says, all these are listening. There's the line. Sunniai sid pir suranat. He's saying the siddhas are listening, the spiritual teachers are listening, the heroic warriors, yogic masters, they all are listening. But he's also pointing out how actually we can listen from that space too. That within us is that spiritual teacher. Within us is that yogic master, that heroic warrior. That these are archetypes, these are parts of us that we can empower, that we can engage with. And then we can experience the listening of what that must be like, right? So that's the call that Guru Nanak is making to us here. And then in the second line, he says, Sunniai darat daval akas. listening, the earth, the Mother Earth, even the Mother Earth is listening. And how must that be? That the earth below our feet, the planet that supports our life, our culture, our society, humanity, all the animals and plants, even from there, listening is happening. And he calls on us to try to identify what that must feel like to connect to Mother Earth as a listening place, right? And so then we go on, and I should say that, this is really calling up the tattvas. This is invoking the earth tattva, the element of earth, in a way that even leaves the literal earth behind. And it steps into a way of connecting beyond the dimension of this life into other dimensions. So then in the third line, Guru Nanak says, Sunniai deep loa patal. Listening, the oceans, the lands of the world, and the nether regions of the underworld. So here, he's referring to, of course, the water tattva again, the element of water, but he's also directing our listening to how the water element would listen in a more fluid way, in a flexible way. And then he's also directing us to what translates here as the nether regions, meaning beyond, below, in other dimensions, other realities, other experiences, just open to that kind of listening too. And then in the fourth line, Guru Nanak says, Sunniai boy na sake kal. Listening is so, when you listen so deeply, then even death seems not to touch you. And, literally, death will touch all of us. But what is that experience? Guru Nanak is asking us to understand that, not be afraid of it, but to see death as just another point in the cycle of life. And that even from there is an aspect of listening that we can understand, we can connect to. And then in the last two lines, Guru Nanak says, Nanak bhagata sada vigas, Sunniai duk pap ganas. Oh Nanak, he's talking in the first person, as if to say, hey dummy, wake up. I'm talking to you, I'm talking to myself, I'm talking to my own mind. Remember that the devotees, those who practice, who do a practice, who are on the path of consciousness, they will reach a place of bliss. They will experience an ease in their life. Sunniai duk pap kanas. Duk is pain. Pap is, it's translated as sin here, but really it's about misdeeds, mistakes, miscalculations, regret. That even those things are erased once you've understood from this deep listening place. So now I'm going to keep these words up, and I want you to just repeat after me. And I'm going to say one line, and then I'd like you to repeat it just so that you check your own pronunciation, because we're going to chant these words. But first I want to go through it just simply, line by line. So I'll say a line, and then I'll give you pause while you say it. I'll say it a second time, and you say it a second time. Then I'll go on to the next line, and we'll go like that through all the lines. Sunniai sid pir surnat,
Sunniai Siddh Pir Surnath, Sunniai Darat Davala Akas, Sunniai Darat Davala Akas, Sunniai Deep Loapatal, Sunniai Deep Loapatal, Sunniai Poe Nasake Kal, Sunniai Poe Nasake Kal, Nanak Bhagata Sada Vigas, Nanak Bhagata Sada Vigas, Sunniai Dukh Pap Ka Nas, Sunniai Dukh Pap Ka Nas, Great. So let's keep the words up there. And I'm going to lead the chanting of this, and just chant along wherever and however you can do that. Let's get this a little closer. Sanavingas, Sunniai Dukkha Pampakarma, Bhagata Sandhavikas, Sunniai Dukkha Pampakarma, Sunniai Siddha Pira Surna, Sunniai Kavalakas, Sunniai Dipavata, Sunniai Poena Sakeka, Nanak Bhagata Sanavikas, Sunniai Dukkha Pampakarma, Sunniai Siddha Pira Surna, Sunniai Kavalakas, Sunniai Dipavata, Sunniai Poena Sakeka, Nanak Bhagata Sanavikas, Sunniai Dukkha Pampakarma, Sunniai Siddha Pira Surna, Sunniai Kavalakas, Sunniai Dipavata, Sunniai Poena Sakeka, Nanak Bhagata Sanavikas, Sunniai Dukkha Pampakarma, So you can relax and open your eyes now. And we're going to talk a little bit more, and then we're going to practice a meditation just in about 10 minutes or so. But I want to talk a little bit before we start that meditation. So once we have been able to have an experience of deep listening, once we've been able to trust in that experience, then the fear that has built up over perhaps a lifetime can start to erode, dissolve. And it's not going to happen in one sitting or even in a few sittings. This will take some time for you to change, for me to change, for all of us to change. Because that's really what we're talking about, is change through listening deeply. And you'll find at some point that you start to become aware that the door has opened, that there's a new threshold that you're crossing into a new sense of self. You connect with your heart, you listen with your heart. Your ears are no longer your primary listening place. The voice in your head is no longer your primary focus, but rather your true self, the voice of your true self, the voice of that innocent primary self that has been pushed to the back of the stage for too long, will emerge more and more. You know, our community is facing some difficult times. We're going to have some difficult conversations, and we're going to have to be able to listen deeply. The world, as I mentioned earlier, is also facing a challenging time. It looks as though people are, picking their side and getting entrenched. And that's true. Some of that is happening, both in our community and in the world around us. But really, we have to be willing to not let that stop us, not live in judgment. Oh, those people can't listen. Those people are just this or that. It's a separating that really will get us into trouble. We have to forgive, we have to accept, and then we have to listen. And listening is it's many faceted. There's listening to what someone may be saying, but there's also listening deeper, listening to what is underneath the surface of what they're saying. Where is their pain? Where is their fear coming from? What are their fears that are motivating them to be seemingly quite guarded? So patience and understanding, humility, compassion, these are all the things that we need. And we've talked about all those things. We've said to ourselves that we are all those things, and yet not as much as we need to be. And that's the real hard thing about right now, is that we thought we had things figured out on this spiritual path. We thought we knew who we were and we could step out the door and no problems, no confrontations, no questions. But now we see that that was a false reality, that we have to own the fact that we don't know everything. As individuals, as a culture, we have to own the willingness to step into not knowing, And that's a kind of Buddhist sensibility of being able to step into the not knowing and be okay there. And I think there's something to be learned from that in that not knowing, we are more willing to listen. We are more willing to open to new voices, voices that we would have dismissed earlier, voices that I did dismiss earlier, people and ideas that we judged too quickly to conform to a past, to a non-real place that we had tried to hold on to. But it's not real. We have to be spontaneous. We have to be in the moment. We have to see what is. These 4 stanzas, Paurees from Japji, are an amazing practice about Sunniai. But Guru Nanak goes on, he's got a lot more to share. And the 4 Paurees that follow these 4 are known as the Mudra Paurees. And these are about surrender, acceptance. That state where you've listened deeply and now you have to accept what you have understood. You can't fall back. You can't, hold on to what was, because you have heard it. You have understood. And so now, it's time to step across that threshold, step out the door into real life with willingness to listen, willingness to be spontaneous, willingness to accept what actually arrives. And it may not be what we want to arrive. It probably won't be what we want to arrive. But at some point, we're going to get better at doing that. At some point, being exposed, being vulnerable, will be in itself a place of strength. That we will learn through that process that in our vulnerability, we are not weak, but we are stronger because we can hear more voices. We can understand more perspectives. And all of that makes us stronger. So I want to practice this meditation for a few minutes. It's fairly easy, not very strenuous. It has a very easy mantra, and we're going to put that up on the screen in a moment. But I want to describe the Mudra Position first. So you're going to be sitting upright, nice and tall, chin tucked in. And the palms are facing upward with the thumbs pointing out forward away from you. And I know it's a little hard for you to see this, but so if you identify as male, then place your right hand over your left. If you identify as female, then put your left hand over your right. And place them just gently at the line of the bottom of the rib cage. Right? And your elbows are relaxed at the sides. And once you've got the mantra, once you've seen the words and understood them, then I want you just to bring your focus to the tip of your nose with your eyes 9/10 closed. And we're going to be chanting this mantra. And so just, if Buddenjot could bring up the words. The mantra is Govinda, Govinda, Hari, Hari. This meditation is called the meditation for a clear mind. And as we chant these words, Govinda, the energy that is taken care of. Hari, the energy that is the creative force, the spark, the light. So this is calling on that energy within us and around us. So experience your mind as you're chanting to start to open that stage up so that you feel the space. You feel like you can have a little light come into all the corners of that stage of your mind so that you become clearer in your understanding of what's in your mind and how you want your mind to be. All right, so we're just going to do this for a few minutes, and then we're going to open up to some questions, and we'll see how that goes. So please join me as we chant this. Govinda, Govinda, Hari, Hari, 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 Govinda Govinda Hari Hari 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 Govinda Govinda Hari
Inhale deeply. And exhale. So I'm going to stop talking about listening for a little while to listen to you. If you have some questions, please put them in the comments area in the chat. And otherwise, I will just tell a story.
Pritpal Singh, someone asked if you could just review how the hands are in that meditation, again, for people who identify as female.
Yeah, so I'm going to do it this way for the time being, just so you can see. So the hands are parallel, but then you roll them, and for the female, you'll want the left hand on top. So the left hand is on top, and your position is just at the edge of the rib cage, the bottom of the rib cage. But the thumbs are pointing straight out. That was an easy question. I'm sure you have some harder questions. Is that true, Purinjot, or shall I just ramble? Because I like to ramble too.
I don't see any other questions just
All right.
yet, but maybe we can give it a second. Someone is asking why, I'm guessing this means why did you tune in the way that you tuned in at the beginning of class?
Okay, well, this was not critically a yoga class. So I tuned in with the Mangala Chalan mantra. It's not uncommon for classes about Dharma to tune in with that. But there are many other mantras that you could use to tune in. So yeah, it wasn't a Kundalini yoga class per se. We did incorporate a meditation, but that's why we used the tuning in as we did.
Great.
So.
Let's see. Someone is asking if you could please share how to distinguish or know between listening to the monkey mind and to our inner self.
It's a really good question. And it takes some discernment and practice and trial and error, to be honest. There's one thing you can start with, and that is that when the voice of your monkey mind is speaking, it tends to be focused on egocentric ideas, motivations, actions. When the true self voice is available to you, it's less, first of all, it's not so talky. You know, it's not a chatterbox. Your monkey mind can be that way, but your inner self, it may come to you in ways that are not so literally talking to you, but rather like a vision or a message that arrives clearly in a feeling, sure, could be some words that you sort of resonate with that have drifted through your mind. Identifying this is really, it's hard. I remember I was living in England in the 70s in London, and we would go out to pick somebody up at the Heathrow airport, and it's a complicated roadway system there. And so as you come into the environment around the airport, I always remember this one sign. It was just a very big sign, and all it said was, "Watch for signs." And that really sums it up.
You know, as you're going down this road of trying to find that inner voice of your true self, you have to watch for signs because it arrives sometimes in unexpected ways. It can arrive in a message, in a conversation that you overhear from some other people, although that's happening a lot less these days because we're interacting with fewer people. But sometimes it arrives in a question from a young child or an observation from a young child, you know, that suddenly there's a lightning bolt of important message that arrives. Or, as I say, within your own meditation, there can be a clarity of resonance when you sort of stumble upon an idea within yourself. Well, maybe I should do this, or maybe I should change the way I do this. And then suddenly there seems to be a thunderous resonation of agreement within you. So these things are not straightforward, but slowly, slowly, we'll start to empower that voice more and disengage from the egocentric monkey mind. I hope that helps. Do we have some other questions?
We do. So someone is wondering, as a beginner, where to start to begin to recite and get to know and understand Japji on a daily practical level.
Well, I think it's the best advice to start at the beginning, to start with Mu Mantra. Ik Onkar Satnam Karta Purak Nirbho Nirvair Akal Murat Ajuni Saipang Gur Prasad Jap Ad Sach Jugad Sach Hai Be Sach Nanak Hosi Be Sach. It's not very long, and it's very powerful. It has some of the most dynamic nod. By that I mean the way that the rhythm and the breath and the sound all works together to have a powerful effect in your mouth to begin with, because your tongue is moving across the acupressure points at the top of the palate, the upper palate, and you know, that's having a physiological effect, but also just the sound of it, just even listening to it, and especially as you say it, then the sound current of the Mu Mantra is so powerful. And it's the essence of Guru Nanak's teachings. You know, Ik Onkar, the first part. There is one, Ik Ong. We chanted Ong at the beginning of the class. That creative energy, Ong, that starts the universe, that Big Bang energy. God, the doing of that. And there is just one essence, one pinpoint of origin, and that thread of origin runs through everything, from me to you, from every atom of my being to every atom of your being, and every atom throughout the entire universe is connected in that oneness. And that's the message of Ek Onkar. And so then studying that and experiencing the nod of it, the sound current of it, is a powerful place to start. You could spend a long time just with Mu Mantra, but you don't have to. Practice that, get familiar with it, and then go to the first Pauree. Soche, sochna uvede, soche lakwa, chupe, and so forth. So you then learn the first Pauree, and you recite that over and over. And Sikh Dharma International on our website, and actually on our YouTube channel, we have videos of all those individual Paurees, each stanza repeated 11 times. And then I would be remiss if I don't point out another way that you can access the Paurees of Japji, and that is on the Japji app. Japji for the Aquarian Age app is available for free, and it looks like that. And it has a free audio that you can read along with, and you can display the Japji in Romanized script or in the original Gurmukhi,
or a combination of both. It also has the translation. And then it also has a button where you can repeat the Pauris. So if you're starting out to learn Japji, you could use the repeat Pauris function to go over and over 11 times, because that's what it's timed for. It'll do 11 times of each of the Pauris as you learn them. And then you can start to recite all of Japji, and you can study the translation here too. So we also have another item that is very useful. I don't have it right handy, but it's the Japji Book. Perhaps if there's someone from SDI, they'll put a link on in the communication, in the chat area. It's a book that we published a few years back that goes into very deep analysis of the meaning and significances of all the different parts of Japji. So it's a great place to start to study that. Do we have more questions, Puranjot?
We do. So someone is wondering if you have any recommendation for someone who feels a deep resonance with Sikh Dharma, but who is rather new to it and would like to learn more, where to begin and how to reconcile with other religious belief systems.
Wow, that last part was a doozy. So the first, yes, how you can connect. Well, certainly during this time of staying home and socially distancing, it's a little harder, but there are some online resources, and I'll tell you about that. But once once COVID-19 is no longer a threat, then going to Gurdwaras, Sikh temples, is an excellent way to do that. We have on the YouTube channel, Sikh Dharma International YouTube channel, an excellent video called Your First Visit to a Sikh Gurdwara. And it just shows you what to expect, what are the protocols, and so that's a good place to start. There's a lot of videos there you might find interesting as you start out exploring Sikh Dharma. You can also find on our website, sikhdharma.org, in Learn, under the Learn tab, that there are several articles there about some of the beliefs and some of the practices that are part of Sikh Dharma. Now, the last part of your question is a little trickier to navigate. Sikh Dharma, the way that I like to talk about it and the way that we are mostly presenting it in our Kundalini Yoga forums, is that this is a dharmic path. By that I mean it's a righteous path of action that leads to spiritual elevation. That's what the dharmic path part is about. The Sikh part is about connecting to the teachings of the Sikh gurus. And these were a series of 10 people who lived starting 500 years ago and moving forward in history in a succession that passed the light of Guru Nanak, the first guru, through each of those gurus. They all identified as being Nanak, as well as they had their own names too. And that accumulated wisdom is embodied in the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib, which are the scriptures compiled, and that the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib is at the epicenter of all activity in every Sikh Gurdwara around the world, because it is revered as the source, the guidance for everyone who follows that path. And that in the daily practice of a Sikh, then a random reading from the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib is meant to be a daily, what's called a hukam, meaning to be in alignment with the will of the divine. And so that hukam speaks to each Sikh as they hear that and gives them guidance. And so that's what the Sikhs do. Now, there are other dharmic paths, and a Sikh also learns that all paths lead to the same place, the same source.
Sikhs do not try to convert people, but rather share ideas, as Guru Nanak did in his life. He traveled over 40,000 miles in 4 or 5 different journeys that he took on foot mostly, 500 years ago. So you can imagine how brutal that must have been, how difficult that must have been. But he would go and spend a month or so at a place, and people would come every day and listen to him. And he would talk, but he would also sing his compositions, like we sang this eighth body. He would sing it, and then people would learn it. It's much easier to learn something if you can sing it, and he knew that. And so people would learn his compositions, and from that they would gain wisdom as well. And so as a Sikh, I welcome all authentic people of spirituality to discourse with and to share bread with, to share life with. I don't want to, I don't need to arrogantly try to define my path as being any better than anybody else's. And in fact, when Guru Nanak would travel to different places, he would often be in a mosque or a Hindu temple, and his role was not to try to tell them how they were bad or wrong, but rather he would identify some hypocritical thing that they might be not practicing. And he would say, well, if you're going to be this, you're going to follow the path of Islam, then make sure that you really do practice the path of compassion, And so that was his thing. Today, I think that the path of a Sikh is really about serving as much as possible, and that you see that around the world. Gurdwaras feed people, and that's a central theme, that wherever you go, Gurdwaras have free kitchens. And it's called the Guru Ka Langar, and that people from any tradition, they don't need to be a Sikh, they're welcome to come there and be fed. So if you're ever traveling and you have no money and you have no food, find a Sikh Gurdwara and they will feed you. And so those actions of feeding people are happening today in difficult situations through COVID. Gurdwaras are organizing, trying to practice social distancing while they're preparing the food, and then doing it in a hygienic way and getting it out to people who need it. So the path of a Sikh is really about service to others. So I hope that answers a few of your questions. Any others, Puranjot? We have just a few more minutes.
Yes. Someone's asking how to understand shunya. Is it just stillness?
Well, it isn't just stillness, because stillness isn't just stillness. Shunya is an experience that goes into stillness. That's the entry place, is stillness. But shunya sort of expands out into this experience of deep connection. Stillness can sound solitary, can sound isolated, but through shunya, you merge outward into the vastness of all of the universe, and feeling that stillness as a connection point to everything is really at the essence of the experience of shunya. From that still point, then all is available. Any others?
Great. Someone is asking, how can we serve people who seem to be trapped in their minds and seem to confuse their judgments with intuitions? And intuitions is in quotation mark.
Yeah. You can serve them by stop judging them. You can serve them by just accepting. There's that old parable about the frog and the scorpion. The scorpion's at the edge of the river, and
he asks the frog, please, would you carry me across the river to the other side on your back? And the scorpion says, oh, no, no, you'll sting me. And the scorpion says, no, really, I promise I won't. And so the frog says, okay, and the scorpion gets on the back, halfway across the river. The scorpion goes ahead and stings the frog. And the frog says, what are you doing? I'll drown and you'll drown. And the scorpion says, well, it's my nature to sting you. In other words, we have to accept that we are only responsible for the change within ourselves. We can't make other people change. We can't shake them awake. I know it feels like that would be just so satisfying, but it really doesn't ever happen. True awakening only happens from within each individual. So patience and compassion is the only place to be in. You can't demand others to change. And last question.
There were two other questions that were larger that feel as though they were very much connected with the answer that you just gave. So I think I will leave those as they are. But quite a few people were asking if you have that recording of the 8th Pauree of Japji, your music, you singing it, or if they can find your music in other places.
Well, there are recordings of my other music.
Mm-hmm.
That is something new, and I have not recorded it yet. But my recordings are available through Spirit Voyage. The extent of my recordings, all my recordings are available through Spirit Voyage. A more limited assortment of my recordings, more current recordings, are available through Spotify and Apple Music. So you'll find those things there. All right. I think, Puranjo, we can close out. I'm going to sing Long Time Sun.
Wonderful.
I hope you'll sing along with me. And I think that's the only, I don't think I have any other announcements to make. I think I'm good to go. So please join me. Ooh, not very in tune. Hold on. Please put your hands together. May the long black sun shine upon you. All love surround you. And the pure light guide your guide your way on. Guide your way on. Satnam, everyone. Be well, be safe, stay healthy. Satnam.